Hey y'all, it's Diana again, and you can tell from the title that I'm doing this show about drag. I thought about it because the last group discussion that I was in over at Marty's podcast she had on Wednesday, they got to discussing drag queens and how some of them hated drag queens and some didn't, and it was kind of back and forth, and I decided I would just say my feelings about the art of drag. But that started a long time ago with my knowledge of and understanding of and being a part of the drag world. Whenever I first started reading about transsexuality and all that, I ordered some magazines called Drag. And it was female impersonators. I mean, these magazines were brand new, but they were from the 60s, and they showed a different drag world than what we know today. During that time, the majority of the drag performers sang live, and they performed in clubs that were geared towards heterosexual clients. I'm sure there were gay people in there as customers, but the majority were just the heterosexual, regular, club-going population that enjoyed the art of female illusion. And back then it was the thing where they could not go in public dressed as women. They had to do their makeup when they got there. And it was a whole different world from what we have today. But this is the world that I saw through a child's eyes, reading these magazines, trying to figure out how I was going to do my own transition. And I remember I was getting these magazines and things when I was 12 years old, and this was a long time ago. And so I would try to fathom in my child's mind how I was going to do this when I grew up. So I got in my head I was going to be a famous female impersonator. That's how I was going to save my money to have my sex change surgery. That was my first thought. That was what I was going to do. And that's what kind of was my idea all along. Once I would put kind of an idea rolling in my head, I would live with that idea for years. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I was going to be a beautiful, glamorous female impersonator, and I was going to make all this money, and I was going to get on hormones, and then I was going to go have surgery. So that was my plan. It was my game plan. And actually, my plan started whenever I was in high school, here in Mississippi, here in Macon. I went to work for this lady, Miss Nell Ferris. She had a clothing store named Ferris Cash and Carry, I think was the name of it. Now, it's a store that her and her husband had opened back in the 30s. They were a family that had several businesses, the Ferris family. They had several businesses in town. All of the Ferris family are gone now. They're not, none of them here anymore. But Miss Nell, she was such a sweet lady. She was a widow. And at one point, we lived right next door to her in town, so that's when she started asking me to work for her in her store, and I loved it. I mean, here it was an old-timey store, and she had all these things that were still in storage in that store from when her and her husband had the store back in the 30s and 40s. And I, being young, you know, I went through and decorated and did all this kind of stuff and cleaned out. And I found this wonderful old clothes. And I found several suits and dresses and things that were from the old days, 40s at least, that would fit me then. And I found shoes. Because one thing about it, black women usually have bigger feet than white women. And they had some shoes that I'm sure were left over from what didn't sell. But they had ordered these larger sizes. I mean, these were like, they were some 10s, 11s, and 12 size shoes. Well, that was hard to find back then. I wore 10 in a women's shoe, and 10 wide, if I could find it. But I found some old pumps and things from the 40s and 50s. I just thought I had just racked up. And a corset, a lace-up kind of corset. And I expect it was from the 30s or 40s. It was not from, you know, the turn of the century or nothing, because that store had not been theirs that long. So I was expecting that this was, you know, a later model. But it was still a lace-up corset. And that's one way that I started training my body, is wearing this lace-up corset. So this was all going with what I was planning on doing whenever I grew up and left home and found what I was going to do with my life. But the very first drag performance that I ever saw, and I think some of you that have been following my videos will know that was at JB's Lounge in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was on Moorhead Street. And it was a Valentine's night, and they were having a big drag show. And that night was the first night I ever saw Heather Delore, Natalie Napier, April Love, and then there was a drag queen that I got to know personally and cannot remember this child's drag name. All I can remember is, I mean, I wrote it down too so that I wouldn't forget it. Mike Penniger. Some of you people will remember Mike Penniger if you knew me back in my Charlotte days. But I can't remember what his drag name was. But this is the first time I saw any drag performer. And I thought it was the most glamorous thing I had ever seen. Oh gosh, you know, because I was totally green. I did not know what to be looking for. And you know, when you're in a dark place, bright spotlights on somebody, they look fabulous. I'm thinking, oh my God. And I got to know, I did not ever see April Love again, and they said later on that she was a transsexual, and she was absolutely gorgeous now. And she wound up moving to Atlanta or somewhere, so I never got to know her. Heather was a drag queen. Natalie Napier was a drag queen, and so was Miss Thing here, Mike Penniger. Yeah. But I got to know Heather really good through the years. I wound up doing shows and things with Heather whenever I did go to work as a female impersonator. But I'm going to put a picture here of Heather. Yeah, that was Heather. And that was actually, that good-looking guy was actually Anastasia's boyfriend at the time when all those publicity pictures were made. So yeah, but I learned real quick how hard it was going to be because I had stage fright, and really, I really was going to be a absolutely horrible female impersonator. I mean, I looked beautiful. People went crazy when I hit the stage. But my job was to be able to walk through those curtains into the center of the stage without falling. And then I was good at pantomiming, and I always chose slow, tear-jerky, sad songs with a lot of emotion and a lot of hand motion and things. And that's how I was able to be a stage performer. Now, somebody that can only do that cannot become, and no matter how beautiful you are, cannot become an established, famous entertainer. And you've got to be able to hit that stage and give them something. You know, give them a show. That's what gets people noticed. So I knew real quick, my $25 a night job doing female impersonation, and that's what you make when you very first start out back then. That wasn't going to get me nowhere. That was not going to buy me a vajaja. So I learned real quick, that was not going to get it. Even when I worked my way up to the house show and was working every week, I wasn't making but $100 a night. I mean, that's nothing. You know, that would have been $400 a month. I mean, they wouldn't have paid my rent in Charlotte. You know, so there was no way I was going to be a famous, well-known, rich female impersonator. So that dream kind of left. But I always have appreciated the art of drag. I went into it, and even today, when I see a show, I think, there's nothing any more fabulous than this outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. I thought it was just the most fabulous, most entertaining thing that I had done to that date in my life. But being one was another story. I definitely was not a good one. But I remember that night at JB's, you know, I met those girls, and I met, you know, my cousin Jody Holiday. I'll put a picture of her in here. Yeah, those pictures were of Jody back in the 70s. She was tall, but she was absolutely beautiful, and she could tear up a stage. Let me tell you, that was one female impersonator that had the talent to go on to be a professional. And I always thought so. I always was willing to back her. I loved to make costumes and things for her. But she just did not have the drive to take her on to be professional. And she had such a religious conviction with her family that she just didn't want to ever be known as doing that professionally. Now, in Charlotte, she did it as often as she could and worked as often as she could, but to be a professional, you'd have to be able to travel and do all that, but she couldn't do that. And here I've spoken before of Scarlet Lefevre, who was originally a friend of Jody's and then became a friend of mine. Here's Scarlet. Okay, there was Scarlet. This picture was made, I put together after she passed away a good many years ago. And I do call drag queens she, especially whenever they are in drag. Not because I see them as women, but I see them as the women in the male gay population. And they all call each other she. But I had to make sure that they knew that there was a difference between them and me, that I was a woman, and that they were men in drag. And they know that. For the most part, they know that. So I have nothing against them for a gender reason or for anything like that. Some of them did have jealousy towards me because I was more woman-looking, and even though they were in full drag, and I could pick up men easily, or they thought I could, and they wanted me to, you know, they used me in that way a lot back then. And I also met that night, I met some transgendered women. I met Teresa, I met Jeanette, I met, let's see, Casey King. I'm going to show you a picture of Casey King here. Oh, she's a dear friend of mine. Casey King and I actually went to high school together. We knew each other in high school. Not that we were friends. Casey was a year older than me. But we became friends later on, after we both went to Charlotte. We became dear friends, and we're still dear friends. Um, and then there was Miranda. Miranda and I had been roommates at one time. I don't have any pictures of her that I can show you. Well, I do have a picture here. Let me show you this. This picture was made of her a good many years after my surgery, and she had decided to start doing drag again. She later on detransitioned and has a successful business as a gay male. So there have been some that I've known that have almost completed and then detransitioned for whatever reason. Hers a lot had to do with her family. And her mother, she's lucky to still have her mother. Her mother's in her 90s. And I'm more power to her. But I really did see her as a beautiful woman. And let's see that I met that night. Oh, this is a story. I'm glad I didn't forget this story. Now this was when Jody Holiday and I were living together, and we always had the house full of drag queens and things. Well, one morning, we got a knock on the door, and it was the Mecklenburg County Health Department. They were using my male name. They had to take me down to the health department because somebody had turned me in as a syphilis carrier. I said, listen, y'all, I don't have nothing. I knew I didn't have nothing. I had not been with anybody at that point. This is before all these other things. And I hadn't been with anybody, and I didn't have any symptoms or nothing. So I said, I don't have anything. They said, well, either you'll come peaceably or we will have to call the police because you're going today. So I went down there, and I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed because they have to take you into a room, and they have to just, you know, look at things. I didn't want anything looked at. I was so embarrassed, so humiliated. I was crying. I was saying, listen, this is a mistake. I don't have anything because I'm not being with anybody. Well, they said, well, we still got to look, and we got to check, and then we got to give you a shot. So I had to have that penicillin shot. They said, we'll let you know how the tests turn out. Well, several days go by, and they didn't call. So I finally had to call and be put on the you know, wait thing for so long. And finally they got on the phone, and they said, oh, your test is negative. I was none too happy over that. I let them have it too. I said, I told you that to begin with. They said, well, if they get a name, they have to, you know, they have to act on it. So somebody set me up. And if any of you queens know, if there's any drag queens watching this and you know who set me up, please let me know. I've been waiting almost 45 years now to find that out. But that night, whenever I was at JB's, I met this female impersonator that had been and I think she was in drag that night. Her name was, well, his name was Mike Sigmund, and I always heard the nickname Sarah Sigmund. So I do not know what her actual, I can't remember now what her actual drag name was, but she did an impersonation of Liz Taylor. And they claimed that she looked just like Liz Taylor back in the early 60s. But then, of course, this was 75, and she didn't look like Liz Taylor to me. But she took a shine. Yes, Sarah Sigmund wanted to be my drag mother. And this girl, she had the most extensive drag wardrobe I have ever seen then and now. I mean, she had her stuff. She had heavy sequins and beaded things, and everything was in plastic zippers and things, and closets and closets and closets of clothes. When she decided she was going to be my drag mama, they were going to help me do a talent show. So they provided the clothes and stuff, and I had already prepared the cabaret, and the cabaret theme from Cabaret. So they provided a costume, or she did, and I won my contest. I did. But, you know, I didn't see her much after that, you know. I just kind of went my way. Everything got exciting for me, and I really just went by the wayside with her, and have no idea through the years what even happened to Bob Sigmund. But I hope he had a happy life. He was an older female impersonator by then, and other than that one time, is the only time I ever seen him in drag, he was a man at a drag, and not even a feminine man. A man, a gay man. And he didn't hang with the most of the drag queens. He was, like I said, a female impersonator. Yeah. So. And later on, after I had surgery, I moved in with Boom Boom Latour, Ricky Carter. He's deceased now. But I moved in with him because he was a good friend of mine, and he was part of the house show whenever I did the house show. He was a comedian, a female impersonation comedian, very relatively famous. Boom Boom Latour was, and Boom Boom's family owned a restaurant, a very well-known restaurant in Charlotte, and I went to work there. And so at that point, I moved in with Ricky, and so I've actually lived with a couple of drag queens in my life. I know that it's not always easy, but it can be a lot of fun as long as they know how to treat you, that you're a woman, that you're not you're not like them, you know. Um, You're not going to normally be borrowing their evening gowns, you know, to go on a date, because most people don't go out with those kind of clothes on. Well, the kind of clothes that I was involved with, you know, because this was in the 70s. And 70s was the day of sequin and bugle beads and rhinestoned outfits. That ostrich feathers. That was the kind of thing that was from the days that I was doing female impersonation. Very glamorous, very, very beautiful, very elegant, very Las Vegas looking is what it was back then. Of course, today it's more modern, more what are the entertainers of today wearing and things. And sometimes, some cases that is, you know, stones and sequins and stuff, but it's a different kind of elegance today than it was then. And I've been to shows in Jackson, Mississippi, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee. I've seen some great shows, you know, in my recent years here, just in the last few years. And I enjoy seeing a show. And if I had a chance, I'd go see one tomorrow because I enjoy the entertainment aspect of it. So if you don't like drag queens, that's you. Actually, no, that's a lie. Most of the transsexuals that I knew went through drag, you know, used it as a stepping stone in some way, except for Jeanette, my best friend. I was a middle-of-the-road kind of girl. I mean, I was horrible on stage. I did it for that extra money, and I would have loved to have been able to have done it better. But I wasn't really, you know, that much into it. Now, Jeanette was a hippie girl. She wore jeans and little tops, and her hair was long, and she wore some eyeshadow and some stuff like that, but she was a hippie girl. We knew her as Jeanette the hippie girl. The one that would be out smoking pot in the parking lot. I loved her dearly. And, but she's the only one that I know that did not at least pass through a drag stage. But, she loved the drag shows, though. Oh, yes. We were there watching them every weekend back before we, you know, were complete. And did a little bit after that. Because they were so entertaining. Sure enough. So, I'm not going to make this any more than it is. Y'all, if you hadn't already done so, what you need to do, you need to subscribe. and hit the little bell so that you'll get a notification every time I put up something new. And leave me a comment, because I like to read comments. Alrighty, y'all.